This is the Concealed Carry Podcast, Season 11, Episode 19. And welcome to the Concealed Carry Podcast, part of the concealedcarry.com network. I am your host, Riley Bowman, and joined today by co-host Jacob Paulsen.
Yes, that's me. I'm here. And Riley is the guy who got a new pair of shoes in the mail today and just put them on, like right now, like in front of me. He's like, "Oh, look, new shoes."
New
He's,
shoes from Victos,
yeah,
actually.
yeah. I don't know what these are called. The
I don't.
core. It says core on the shoe.
I forgot already too. Yeah, I don't know. Is this on the tag?
I don't
No,
know.
that's something else entirely. Yeah, I don't know.
Some.
They look cool.
Yeah, no, they
They feel
look
good.
comfy. Yeah.
They're grippy. And I guess stay tuned for perhaps a review or something on them at some point here. So
Yeah. All right.
yeah, there you go. And Jacob's the guy that also got the same shoes.
Yes, but I did not like. Oh, I'm going to put them on right now. I thought, I'd take them home.
Well,
Maybe tomorrow.
So I mean, I came in today. They're still pretty okay, but these are. Yeah, I've had these old Solomons I've used for probably 3 or 4 years at this point, and the inside is pretty shot.
So you decided
So
you were due for an upgrade anyway.
I was like, I'm tired of wearing these old shoes. Let's put on these new ones.
Oh, it's cool. It's all good.
Yeah.
Thank you, Victos.
Yeah. So checking out some things there. Today is Thursday, May 29th, 2025, as of recording of this episode. This is actually part 2 of our huge super episode of legislative updates. We had so many to cover. We knew we couldn't get it done all in one episode, or that one episode would go 2 hours plus probably. So here we are with part 2. We got a bunch of updates still to go over, some federal ones, a couple of important bills to protect your privacy with respect to gun purchases. You're going to want to hear about that. I think that's a big one, especially on the federal level. There's been a few states that have, this is an interesting one because some states have already taken measures like this. Some states have gone the opposite direction.
Yes.
This throws that all into disarray, at least,
if it passes.
Yeah. So that'll be interesting to cover. But we got news to cover out of Oklahoma, the Dakotas, Colorado, California, Arizona, Washington. Big stuff there. Some really interesting stuff too.
Some of these are pretty heavy.
Oh yeah.
I mean, big, massive, comprehensive gun control stuff.
Absolutely. So looking forward to getting into that all of that with you. But first, today's episode is sponsored by Tactical RX.
Yeah, I love Tactical RX. Huge fan. These guys, they just make the best stuff, and it's not that expensive, frankly, relatively to, I think, other kind of premier, glasses brands. So tacticalrx.com, they have both non-prescription and prescription options. They have lots of different options in terms of frames, colors, lens options. And I'll just add this little tidbit, because I don't know if we've said this before when we talked about Tactical RX, that they are very helpful on the phone. So glasses are a very personalized product. And so it might be that, on the website, you just can't make up your mind. You kind of got a question about will I get these lenses with that? Like whatever the thing is, the answer is call them. Just call them. These guys will take the phone call. They will walk you through it. They'll address whatever questions. If you need something custom made for you, they'll do that all day long. That is their bread and butter. No problem. So give them a call if you need something. tacticalrx.com.
Awesome. That's our first episode sponsor. And the second sponsor is the 2025 Guardian Conference.
Woohoo!
Again, yes. But this is go time for the conference. Folks, if you're thinking of being there, now's the time to get signed up.
Yeah.
One, you're going to want to make preparations to travel there, wherever you're coming from. You're going to want to make sure you get a hotel. I don't know what the hotel room blocks rates look like.
Yeah. You have until about August 15th, assuming there's any rooms left.
Right.
But August 15th is the cutoff to get the group rate at all the hotels.
Not that you have to stay in our, special hotel, block rooms or whatever they call it, because you can actually stay on site too. There's tent sites, there's RV sites, camper sites that are available too if you want to save some money that way.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of driving my RV down there. Haven't decided for sure.
Let's talk about that offline. That changes things. I mean, it's just awesome. I can't say enough. I mean, we're a little more than 90 days out, and some people, your work situation is such that it's hard to reserve or to take time off too far in advance. You can't be like, hey, 9 months from now. But now we're in that position where people are, we're almost 90 days out. So your work schedule is starting to kind of, maybe for some of you, start to kind of get to that point where you might be entering the window where you can kind of go to a boss and say, hey, I need to take these days off. It's a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So you're probably going to have to take off, maybe at least partially or all of Thursday and Friday and maybe some of Monday for travel. But I'm telling you, it's going to be the biggest ROI. I say this every time I talk about it, and I mean it. The biggest ROI you can get for the money and time you're going to invest in your firearm and self-defense training. It's just no way it could be better, and it's going to be fantastic. I'll share one last comment.
Yeah.
I'm blessed to be part of a family that really supports me. And so the last 3 years, my dad has been there. This year, he will not make it. But I have a brother that's been there every year. He's been there more times than I have. And I have another brother who was there last year for the first time. And his name's Eric. And I asked Eric after the event last year, I said, what was the biggest thing that you were surprised about at the Guardian conference? Like, you knew that we were going to be doing pew-pews. Like, what did you not anticipate? And what he said was, I didn't anticipate what kind of a community it would be. He said, I've been to tons of conferences, tons of trade shows, and it's pretty just kind of business-like atmosphere where most people are not going home with new friends. And he's like, here it's like family. He's like, I'm shocked by how much it's like a community of people. Whether it's your first year at the conference or your fifth year at the conference, you're going to find it's family. Like it is you're going to walk away with new friends.
Yep.
And we want you to come be part of the family.
I think part of the reason for that, Jacob, is number one, we work really hard to deliver big on this event. And one of the ways that we do that is in making it as turnkey and as easy on attendees as possible to be there. And that once you're there, you're there. Meaning that I've been to events where you hit lunch break and you're on your own for
Everyone
lunch.
scatters.
And exactly, everyone goes, does their thing, goes into town, gets lunch, or they brought their own lunch. But here we're providing lunch for you. That's included in the tuition. So you come in the morning. We have breakfast available in the morning.
Most of the dinners are included.
And most of the dinners are included.
If you're a Guardian Nation member, all the dinners are included.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so you're there the whole. Now, you don't have to be if you're a recluse and you're like, I've had enough socialization this weekend. You're welcome to go do whatever. But we do encourage you to be to integrate as part of the family and to be a part of the community that is built there. And one of the ways that happens is people sharing meals, because you walk from your class you just had with John and you go to lunch together with John. You sit down across the picnic table from John and eat your Chick-fil-A sandwich or whatever it is.
You ask him about
and
that cool gun he was shooting, and then you're talking about where you're from and what you do, and it's family. I just don't know how else to say it, and I mean it from the deepest part of my soul. If you come to that event, you're family.
Yep. Hopefully we'll see you there September 19th to the 21st of this year, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Traveling there is pretty easy. A lot of parts of the country you can reach within a reasonable drive, or flying into Will Rogers International Airport there is pretty easy to do as well, and relatively affordable because it's a big enough airport that it's that way. It has connections with a lot of airports around the country, and we're not too far from the airport either. As far as even right to the range, you can get there in about 45 minutes or so. Hotels are really close to the range as well.
Yeah. We had a guy last year. I don't know if you remember this cat. He was great. I won't say his name because privacy, but he flew into the airport, took an Uber out to the Oklahoma City Gun Club, put up his tent.
Mm-hmm.
He had a tent was part of his luggage. He flew in, but he brought a tent, put it up, and he didn't leave the whole weekend. He Ubered out on like Monday morning back to the airport.
Yep.
Showered on site, ate all his meals on site.
Yes.
I mean, the whole thing. He didn't have a rental car. He just walked back and forth all his classes. It was fabulous. And I was like, how cool that you could do that,
It is cool because we've made that possible.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. We're going to take some props for that, because I mean, when you have pretty much every meal provided, you can stay on site, camp on site. There are showers on site. I mean, yeah, you can do exactly what that dude did.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was epic. Epic.
Hopefully we'll see you there. GuardianConference.com. GuardianConference.com. Let's get into our first news stories. By the way, you're going to want to stick around to hear these stories, because we're not going to talk about a big win for 2A advocates on the federal level, but also we're going to talk about one anti-2A state where you can apply for a permit now to carry as a non-resident. And this is from a state you would not expect, and in a way you wouldn't expect. And there's some hoops you got to jump through. So just stick around for that. But we're also going to talk about how backwards and restrictive two other states are becoming. You're going to want to learn about those as well. And there's some other good news too. We got some great news out of Oklahoma, South Dakota, and North Dakota. But let's get into the first story here. Congress moves to block gun purchase surveillance with new bill. This is talking about Senate Bill 1715 and House Resolution 1181, written by Jacob Paulsen on concealedcarry.com. Jacob, what's the skinny here?
So you may recall about this time last year, we did a big episode on the topic of merchant category codes.
Yep.
So I'll try and keep this short, because if you really should be aware of this in detail and what the drama is, what the issue is. So you should go read the article on our site about that, or you should go listen to the podcast we recorded about that.
Mm-hmm.
But to try and keep this concise, what you have is a move by anti-gunners to force gun retailers and ammunition retailers to use a specific code with their merchant providers, with the companies they use
Yep.
to collect, to take credit card payments from Visa, MasterCard, American Express, et cetera, that would allow banking institutions, credit card companies and banking institutions, Chase Bank, Capital One, Wells Fargo, whoever, to be able to identify which transactions took place at a gun/ammunition retailer. And this creates a situation where now banking institutions, a private entity that's not even government, now can basically create a list of gun owners. They can create a backdoor registry of gun owners and do with it whatever they want.
Right.
Give it to whoever they want, sell it to whoever they want, use that data to serve you whatever advertising or other information they want. And that's the intent by the anti-gunners with this little scheme. And so since this became a thing, you've had some states that have passed laws that require the use of this code. Like, hey, if you're a gun retailer in this state, you must use this code for all transactions. And that's a minority state. We're talking like 4 of them, though me and Riley live in one.
Yeah.
And then you have a whole massive number of states, over 20, like 20 of them plus. Like we're probably right around half now, probably about 25 states that have passed laws that say you may not. It is prohibited to use this code or to force a retailer to use this code in this state. And so now you have U.S. Congress who is saying, oh, okay, yeah, that's a problem.
Yeah.
We're saying that there's some drama here and we want to nip this in the bud. So I'm trying to think who Bill Hagerty, representative from Tennessee, has introduced this new legislation in the U.S. House that would block or prohibit the use of these merchant category codes nationwide. So it would remove this as being a potential issue in any given state. And so this is something I'd be very grateful for personally, because here in Colorado, we're currently being required to use this code, which means that if I go down the road to a gun store or even a store, like I might be going to a retailer to buy some, I was about to say golf clubs, but I don't golf. Who am I fooling? To buy a baseball mitt, and that would identify me as a gun owner for Capital One or something like. So I don't like that. So we've been encouraging people in those states where you have this merchant category code requirement to use cash for all transactions at any outdoor retailer, and certainly at any gun or ammunition retailer. But this Congress act proposal would nip that in the butt.
Yeah. It's so concerning to me because the whole point here is, and gun owners should be concerned about this, because you create a de facto gun registry when you put together databases like this, because it's like, and it's not even a registry that the government, they could probably get their hands on it, right? But it's not even a registry that the government has and controls. It's a gun registry that Capital Ones and Bankers of America of the world, now have their hands on. And first of all, there's security concerns right there
well, it's worth noting that when you get a credit card from whoever you get it from, your bank, from credit card company, from whatever financial institution, I absolutely promise you are signing away your rights to all the privacy with all your purchase data.
Yeah.
Ask me how I know. Like the marketers have been feeding
How
on
do
this
you
for
know?
years. We've been feeding on this for years. Like there's a
Yes.
reason. Like traditionally, this data is used for remarketing. So if you're buying iron supplements and weird sized pillows, then we think, oh, and you're a woman and you're between this age and this age, you're probably pregnant. So now we start sending you advertising that's for cribs and changing tables, right? So
Hmm.
like this, I'm just going to give you some context. This is why credit card companies and banking institutions, financial institutions, they make a fortune. A massive pillar of their profit center is reutilizing and reselling your transactional data. So they are extremely good and they already have the infrastructure to build these databases and these systems. And I just don't think we want them to have the list of who owns guns in America.
Yeah. Yeah. So, the other concern here is just, I think, a security concern that, I mean, how many leaks have we seen of various consumer
Oh,
data
all
over
the
the years,
time.
right? And
Well,
now
I mean,
who knows who gets a hold of that data? And now it's like, hey, this guy, good chance he has guns and ammo in his house because he's bought this and this and this, So, um, categorizing those things like that is problematic in that way. But then there's the other side of it, which is banks being able to then use that in a discriminatory way against purchasers.
or in cahoots with the government.
Yes.
Right after the January
Right.
6th, whatever we call that thing,
Yes.
riot, insurrection, peaceful protest, whatever you want to call it is fine. But after that event, you had the FBI working with Citibank and Bank of America to curate data to identify who was there that day, and also based on what the purchase data was, what kind of people those people
Yes.
were, who should be investigated. So the government already has a
Yep.
track record of working with these financial institutions to build a target list to persecute and prosecute people.
Yes. Thank you for bringing that up as well. So this is a big deal. John comments here in the comments on Facebook. Jacob, he says, "Sounds to me like this will make it a huge problem for online buying with places like Gunbroker." I don't know if I'm
Probably
understanding.
not.
Yeah.
Because gunbroker is based in a state where it's not an issue. So
Mhm.
the way these laws generally work is it's not about who the consumer is, it's about the retailer. In fact, that's the only way it can work. So the question is, am I buying from a company? Okay, in fact, this is worth addressing for our company in case anyone has concerns. So we're in Colorado. Our company's in Colorado. Let's say you're a customer in Wyoming, God's country. Wyoming's awesome, way better than Idaho. So if you're in Wyoming and you're like, man, I'm worried about placing an order on Gunbroker. I'm worried about placing an order on concealedcarry.com because I don't know where those companies are based, or they might be based in a state where these merchant category codes are required. That's a valid concern. Now, Gunbroker, I can just tell you, is in a state where it's not required. They don't care that you're in Wyoming, by the way, because the requirement from the laws at a state level is on the retailers, not on the consumers. So if the retailer is based in, say, Colorado or California, these are states that have that requirement, then the retailer has the code in force, right? And it doesn't matter who the customer is. It doesn't matter if the customer lives in Wyoming or Washington or West Virginia or Wisconsin. Those are all the W states, in case you're
Mm.
missing where I was going with that. If you buy from a retailer who's based in a state where that retailer is required to use that code, then you're at risk. Okay. Now, I'll just quickly add to alleviate some potential privacy concerns that our company is actually exempt from that. So, though we are located in Colorado, which would traditionally require a firearm and ammunition retailer to use that category code, we do not use that code because we do not sell firearms or ammunition. And so the law here in Colorado exempts us or does not include us in that requirement. So purchasing from our website would not be a problem. But yes, I mean this is a huge concern. In fact, when this law was being proposed, that we had a company meeting, I was like, guys, we might have to move. Like I just don't know if we can stay in Colorado with good conscience of heart, knowing that we're facilitating the building of a registry of our customers by some random bank. But luckily, that's not an issue for us. But yeah, that's something to think about.
Yep. Yep. The other comment here is from Joseph. He says that the problem is less than half of Americans own firearms. Since we are the minority, the majority want to infringe on our freedoms. There's some truth and some irony in what Joseph is saying there, because so much of what you hear a lot of times is how important it is that we protect minorities in our country. And now, as gun owners, we are, I guess you could describe as a minority.
It would depend on
So,
the data you look at. Yeah, certainly. There are
right,
research
right,
studies that suggest that more than half of American households have guns. But it
sure,
tends to be a regional thing, right? In
yeah,
Wyoming, in God's country, the number, what percentage of households have a gun is probably very high. It's probably more than 70%. But then in California, it's probably lower than 40%. I don't know. I'm making up these numbers. But it is regional, and that's how these things come to be. So, yes, that's
yeah,
why we see these battles.
yeah. All righty, let's move on to DOJ retreats in forced reset trigger fight. What gun owners need to know. This is this has kind of been a heating up sort of thing as of recently, where it's become quite popular. These products of these forced reset triggers, which if you're not familiar with how these work, the idea is that you press the trigger, and usually these are installed in like an AR-15 because that's they're sold as it's called a cassette trigger, by the way, if you're not familiar with that. The trigger itself is kind of an all-in-one trigger assembly that's contained in a box that drops into your AR-15 receiver, and this is not a unique trigger. Like the idea of a cassette trigger is not unique to just forced reset triggers. Like companies like Hyperfire, for instance, have been selling cassette trigger kits for years. You just drop things in, and now you have a new trigger in your gun or whatever. But these force reset triggers, you drop in, and the way it works is, when you have that set to, you can go from semi-automatic to kind of the fully automatic position and get forced reset, which is where you press the trigger, and then after the gun cycles, it forces your finger off the trigger forces the trigger to reset. And if you keep pressure on it, you're just going to press the trigger again. It kind of basically makes your gun fire in a simulated fully automatic manner, as long as you keep pressure on the trigger. If you want it to stop firing, you just got to release the trigger. But anyway, so
It's about loopholes in the way the laws are written.
right, because the law is written in such a way that a fully automatic gun is defined as one where a single
Single
press of the
press.
trigger results in multiple rounds being fired. And I know many of you are probably familiar with that concept with these types of triggers, but I want to make sure that I know there's some out there that aren't. But this has been heating up because people have wanted to regulate these as a machine gun, as another category of machine gun, so that they are then regulated, or at the very least they basically become prohibitive at that point for most people to own and buy. So what's the skinny here with this latest update, Jacob?
Well, what you have is you have companies like the company that sells the force resetting trigger,
Yeah,
who
Rare Breed is
rare
one of
breed
yeah.
rare breed
I don't think
triggers.
they're the only company that makes them.
No, but companies
Yeah.
like this,
Yep.
they filed lawsuit against the United States because the ATF reclassified their product as a machine gun. So the ATF says, "Hey, your product is super naughty, and we don't like it now, and so it's now a machine gun, and as a machine gun, therefore,
Yep.
it's banned and/or regulated as machine guns are." So then, Rare Breed's like, "No, that's not cool, man. We're suing you." And they're not the only ones. There's a bunch of companies that, Second Amendment groups as well, that filed similar lawsuits, all against the United States. And so now that you have the Trump administration with Trump cronies in there, you have the Department of Justice, the DOJ, who's basically saying, "Hey, you know how you were suing us? Like, we're going to settle the lawsuit by saying, yeah, you're right. We'll give you everything you want. We'll no longer classify these as machine guns, and we're all happy and can go home now." So whereas previously the Biden administration directed the action to reclassify these things that way and was probably ready to put up a fight to fight the lawsuit, the Trump administration saying, "Oh no, yeah, no, it's cool. Like, you win the lawsuit. We're good. We'll capitulate and give you what you want." So that's kind of how this goes. Now, what's unique about this in many respects is that it sets a precedent that would be difficult to overcome. So it would be very challenging at this point via any sort of like here's why. Let me clarify it this way. In fact, in the last episode recorded, I said something to this effect. I said, when the way you regulate gun control is by the administration, the U.S. president and its administration, directing the ATF and federal law agencies to just have new rules and new to administer things differently, like the ATF did in this case, then the next president can come in and just change it all, right? And so you might be thinking, okay, great, I guess we won the victory for now, but the next administration come in and do the opposite, right? No, 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 no. Not the case, because this is not the way it was settled is via lawsuit. The Department of Justice was sued by Rare Breed Triggers and by the NRA and whoever else. I don't know. I don't even know if it was the NRA, just a bunch of groups. And they settled the lawsuit. So that establishes a legal precedent that can't be changed by the new administration just telling the ATF to redefine it next time.
Yep. Yeah. No, that's a good explanation. I appreciate you going through that with us. The settlement agreement, by the way, is such that the lawsuits against Rare Breed Triggers have been or will be dropped, will be dismissed. Property that was seized, and this is true. I remember seeing this reported that some purchasers or owners of force reset triggers had them seized by the ATF. They may get them back. That's if they still exist. I don't know if I don't know. Maybe they do, but
or that maybe they'll be compensated. Because it's a lawsuit,
right?
To waiting to happen if you had this taken away from you, and you don't get it back.
Yep. And then they'll stop enforcing the machine gun classification against force reset triggers. So I don't necessarily have a dog in this particular fight because I've never even personally been all that intrigued by having one of these products. I have very little interest. I don't get me wrong. I love shooting fully automatic guns. I think it's fun for about 2 minutes, and then it's kind of like, oh, okay, cool. And that's all. That's what it is. It's fun. It's fun to do a little bit in moderation, as far as I'm concerned. And other than that, I much more care about having fun putting bullets in places that I want to, and that's hard to do when you're shooting fully auto all the time. The other aspect is that it's really expensive to support the habit of shooting, fully automatic all the time. And so, it's like, okay, cool, but this is still a win because, we're talking about an accessory level product that the government tried to regulate, which applies to other accessory type products. And we've seen a move over the last few years to really try to do this. I mean, we're talking about bump stocks, which was kind of the original thing that was like this that got regulated.
Pistol braces,
these force reset triggers, suppressors. Again, another accessory that's been regulated for like almost 100 years. And so, we just need to be done with trying to regulate accessories in firearms, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, here's how I feel about it. If you want these triggers to be illegal, go pass a law. Like, go write some legislation and go put it through the proper channels. And, I may not like it. I may not agree with it. I may think it's unconstitutional, but that's why we have a legal process. And that's why we have courts to, deal with these issues when we don't think they're constitutional. But my beef is with an administration leveraging the ATF like a weapon to basically change the laws on people, out of the blue and make them criminals and then go confiscate their product that they bought perfectly legally because they just decided on a whim to change the way something's regulated.
Yeah,
that's the real beef here for me. It's like, just don't do that. Like, go pass a law if you want to.
Sure,
if you want to change the law, pass a law.
And it has always chafed me the wrong way when, by administrative fiat, we're like, hey, we're just going to change this regulation and add this thing into this category, and now that's illegal. And we're going to retroactively say all the things you bought before are now illegal too, which is what happened with bump stocks,
and pistol braces
and braces. That is like that concept just it just chased me really in the wrong way.
Yeah, for decades to go by with the ATF saying this is legal, and then all of a sudden they're like, never mind, it's illegal now, and if you have one, like, we'll prosecute you.
Yeah, or turn it in.
Yeah, like, what?
Yep.
This is crazy talk. So anyway, that's the real key issue at stake.
Yeah.
It's about authority.
Let's go to our state roundup now. So we've got a number of states to discuss legislative updates from. First one up is Oklahoma, oklahoma.concealedcarry.com. Oklahoma enacts House Bill 2818, a win for defensive gun rights. So this one is really, I think, quite interesting. And we talked about it a little bit in our team meeting this morning. And so tell us about it.
Yeah. So I've not done a real heavy analysis of what the law was prior to this going into effect, and so I had to be a little bit cautious. But in Oklahoma, previously to this new law, apparently it was a felony to point a gun at someone. Now I'm sure that there were exceptions. Certainly if you could use a gun, you can point a gun, right? Like that's just the way it works legally. But apparently it was sort of like if you can't use the gun, then you can't point the gun. Like there was no like gray area middle ground between you know crossing a line where defense use of deadly force is acceptable to anything before that being a place where you could potentially use the threat of a gun. Now, that's true in most states, by the way. I think that's a pretty universal thing. Putting someone in fear that you are going to use a gun is, generally speaking, felony menacing, or depending on how the charge comes, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. So that's always been the case. But Oklahoma is seeking to change that. Oklahoma changed that. So Oklahoma passed this law that basically allows that under certain circumstances where you would not be able to use a gun, you could still threaten with it. You could still present it or tell the person you had it or even point it at them. And these are circumstances specifically relating to potential self-defense, though not yet having crossed a deadly force barrier, and or defensive property, which is quite fascinating to me. So it's like you're threatening to steal my lawnmower, and maybe this is a bad example. Maybe some attorney like Jacob, that's not how it works. But the way I read it, the way I perceive this new law, if you're trying to steal my lawnmower, I can now say, hey, dude, I got a gun, or straight up point it at you and be like, back off my lawnmower. And I can't shoot you, but I can point that gun at you.
It introduces the term, and this is fascinating to me, defensive display into Oklahoma law. That includes things like telling someone you are armed as a deterrent, putting your hand on your holstered weapon, or briefly revealing your firearm in a non-threatening way. This is a defensive display as a legal term now, apparently in the state of Oklahoma. Such a fascinating thing to see codified into law.
Yeah.
Now, I'll just throw out my opinion on this. I don't think this necessarily says that. I still think that there's certain things that are unwise to do in certain
There's some
contexts,
nuance.
in certain circumstances, and that that people want to be careful about what and how they go about things.
It's not a blanket green light to point your gun at people no matter in danger any situation ever.
Right.
There's still thresholds and requirements.
And I would still encourage people to make sure you have a solid moral footing for yourself as far as like what you consider to be right versus wrong, regardless of what law says, and regardless of what law says you are permitted to do, even because there's certain things that I would not be willing to do, even if the law said I could do it.
Yeah,
like pointing a gun at a person, unless I was actually justified in pulling the trigger. Like that's not a go in my book. But there's also other tactical related things like telling someone you're armed as a deterrent. Can that work? Yeah, I suppose. Could it also not work? Yeah, and now you're behind the power curve because you just played your card saying, "Hey, I've got a gun," but you're not actually like that. May lead your opponent to think that, oh, but he's not willing to use it, and that may it just could lead to other sticky situations, including maybe even having someone take your gun away from you because you're just not quite ready to draw it and get it out yet, but yet they are willing to.
It's a significant escalation of force.
It is.
Right. And so sometimes an escalation of force is wise, but a lot of times escalating the level of force is a real bad idea, And so I think that's
right.
the way to think of it too.
Well, that is a good way of thinking of it because like these are things that are supposedly legal now as a defensive display to help de-escalate a situation. But in reality, you are escalating in the hopes of de-escalating, and that it may actually just escalate is what Jacob is saying.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that
it
is
might
very
be like,
valid
hey,
point.
I dare you. And like, no, I double dare you.
Exactly.
And you're hoping they're like, oh, then never mind. But they might be like, well, I triple dog dare you.
Yeah. But it's a fascinating thing to see passed, and I mean, I don't necessarily have a problem with it from a
No issue.
standpoint of like gun rights just got stronger, I guess, at least in the sense of defense
I,
in the state of
I
Oklahoma.
would love to know what incident drove someone to think this law was necessary. Like generally, these kinds of things come on the heels of something that happened, where
Right,
someone was charged, convicted, and someone's like, "That's not right, man. We got to change the laws."
right.
So I would love to know what that incident was, if there was one.
Yep. Let's turn now to the Dakotas. First up,
South,
South Dakota.
South Dakota. We only have two states in this whole country that start with the letter S, and both of them are the adjective South.
Yeah.
So we couldn't come up with just an S state.
Mm, good point.
Sakota,
Dakota.
Salina.
Right.
So, okay, South Dakota. So the deal here is that previously, basically, guns on college campuses was problematic at best. And new law, what's the name of the law? House Bill 1222, okay, has changed this quite a bit. And this was signed by the governor back in March. And the idea here is that we're now going to give some concealed carry authority or permission to those with a South Dakota enhanced permit. So it's not anybody in South Dakota who's cruising around with constitutional carry or whatever basic permit thing. No, enhanced permittees only now can carry concealed on campus. And specifically, something I appreciate about the way this law was structured is it restricts the ability for the school or the board of the school to impose much in the way of restrictions. So it's not. It's more than just a kind of a green light to carry unless someone says otherwise. It's like green light to carry, and people may not say otherwise. And I think that's a distinct difference.
Yeah.
In fact, it's kind of interesting for me to see this because on July 1st last year here in Colorado, we had a new law go into effect that basically removed our ability to carry on campuses, on college campuses. And now here we are adding that to South Dakota. It's a relatively low number of states in this country that statutorily allow concealed carry on college campuses and prohibit schools from regulating it at all.
Mm-hmm.
And so South Dakota is kind of now in that group.
Yeah. So big news and big win out of South Dakota with respect to that. Very, very cool to see.
To be clear, there are some situations the school could regulate, like they like, oh, in this classroom we have oxygen tanks or combustible liquids, and I don't know why they would think that the presence of a gun somehow would make everything blow up. But they do have some potential regulation. I just want to clarify that. But broadly speaking, like they can't tell you where you can and can't carry.
Out of the northern sister to South Dakota, North Dakota, updates carry laws. What you need to know is the title of the article on northdakota.concealedcarry.com. This is House Bill 1588, which was signed into law back in April. So what's the story here? Give us the tea on House Bill 1588.
So a couple of things this did. One thing it did is it impacted duty to notify. So we did an episode a couple of weeks ago about law enforcement interactions, and we talked a lot about duty to notify. But in North Dakota, there was a distinction between those who had a permit and those who were carrying under constitutional carry or permitless carry authority. And those who had a permit did not have to disclose to law enforcement proactively that they had said gun. But those who were carrying under constitutional permitless authority did have to disclose. They did have a duty to notify.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the provisions of this new bill, what is it, House Bill 1588,
Mm-hmm.
is that we've removed that now. So regardless now, if you do or don't have a permit, you have no obligation to proactively inform the officer. Only if asked specifically do you need to do that. The other thing House Bill 1588 did is it authorized the lawful carrying of firearms in public and government-owned buildings. So there's still some buildings that are going to be off limits. It's not like now all government buildings must allow it. It's more of a previously all government buildings were banned. And so now we're going to say, hey, they're not banned unless otherwise specified.
Yeah. And it looks like that is more of a state level thing where they're leaving it up to local jurisdictions to determine local policy.
Correct. Yeah. So if the city of whatever, Bismarck, how many North Dakota cities can you name?
Fargo,
nice. Well
Bismarck,
played.
yeah.
Fargo's where Shields is based. Fargo and Bismarck. That's all I can do. That's all I got.
I'm sure I could come up with there's something that's like on the tip of my tongue, but like it starts with an R, I want to say. Anyway, yeah, those are the two for sure.
So if the city of Fargo wants to ban guns in town city hall, they can do that. That's fine. But the burden is on the jurisdiction to choose to ban guns. So it's a guns are allowed unless otherwise stated. The third thing that this House bill did, and I got to make sure I'm careful here, so let me make sure I read this, is it authorizes, quote, the State Board of Higher Education the ability to allow guns on school property or in specific parts, buildings, events, etc. Basically, the idea here is it's saying, hey, instead of having laws that say guns are okay or not okay in schools, we're going to push the authority down to the school board, the higher, whatever school, what is it called again? I already forgot again. State Board of Higher Education, and let them decide. We're going to let them regulate it, however they think is best. So if they think that guns should be allowed in classrooms but not in sporting arenas, that's fine. We're going to let them, they can regulate it however they want. So we're just moving the authority down to that level so that they can make those decisions.
It wasn't an R, it was Grand Forks.
Grand Forks, yeah. I've heard of it, but I never would have come up with that spontaneously.
There's a border town too that it slips my mind. Back when I used to work for the good old General Services Administration, somebody I knew had to go up there occasionally and do work or whatever in federal buildings at the border there.
There was some federal buildings in some city that's on the border somewhere
because
in North Dakota.
Yeah, I mean.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. I'm sure it's a great state. This is not intended to make fun. I mean, how many of you can name cities in Wyoming? Yeah, I'm from Wyoming. I love Wyoming.
Oh, I could name a bunch of cities in Wyoming.
Well, you grew up bordering
cities,
Wyoming.
Towns.
You've had jobs in Wyoming.
I have actually.
So you're but I mean, I'm just saying, like, our inability to come up with the name of a city in North Dakota is no slight on North Dakota. I'm sure it's a wonderful place.
It's one of the few states I have yet to visit.
I've been there. Yeah.
I think there's 6 states I don't have time in, and that's one of them.
That's one of them. All right, well, we'll fix that one day.
Yeah. It's a little bit out of the way, unfortunately.
Not a lot there.
Yeah. All right. What do we got next?
Colorado.
New Colorado ammo law raises minimum age and imposes delivery restrictions. This is an unfortunate one for us here since we are in Colorado.
And this is probably not the one everybody wants us to talk about, so I suppose we should talk about that one too. But so Colorado, we've passed a couple of new laws. This ammo law is pretty easy to address relatively quickly, but this new ammo law basically says you have to be 21 or older to buy ammo. So 20-year-olds just can't buy ammo. It doesn't matter the ammo. We're talking all ammo. Ammo is ammo for the sake of this law. Must be 21 or older to buy it. If it comes in the mail to you, then the shipper is required to make sure the carrier knows it's ammo, and the carrier is required to ensure whoever receives it signs for it and is 21 years of age or older. So that we don't allow a loophole that 20-year-olds dare to buy ammo online and have it show up at their house.
Right.
Or what a nightmare. I'm just thinking about what a pain. Just the idea of signature confirmation at all is a pain. But anyway, and also this law prohibits ammo from being displayed in a way that it can basically be stolen. We're way too concerned that those 20-year-olds, now they can't buy ammo, are going to go in the gun store and just steal the ammo. So ammo has to be displayed in locked cases or behind a retail counter or something like that.
Right. I think there was one exception, which is, there is a military service exemption.
There's also a caliber exception.
Yeah. 22 long rifle is exempted, right?
Yeah. 22 LR.
And then the other thing, though, too, is if you purchase, I think, ammo at a shooting range.
Right, for on-site use.
That you're going to shoot at that range.
Yeah, so if you're 18-year-old and you want to go to a gun range and buy ammo and consume it on-site, that's fine. But you can't walk out with the ammo.
Yep.
On-site consumption.
Yeah.
Sounds like a beer.
I mean, the summary you gave in this article is spot on, where you say, this bill will not save lives.
0.
Yeah. It'll punish 20-year-old women. Apparently just women. No, I'm just kidding.
Did I say that?
Yeah. It'll punish 20-year-old women who want to buy a box of ammo for their rifle.
Okay. I guess I was really concerned about women at the time I wrote this. It'll punish all 20-year-old women and men, but maybe I was thinking that people get more animated when we talk.
I think you were just coming up with like different scenarios.
Yeah, I'd have to read it in context.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, this is this is where we live, and this is what we are unfortunately dealing with.
Yeah, so let's talk about Senate Bill 25-003, which is
Yes.
not on our little show notes. I guess we could add it, but
Yes.
this is the one that's getting a lot of national news. This is one people call me about. I talked to a friend of mine today in South Carolina, and the first thing he asked is about this new law we got in Colorado.
Yeah.
So let me try and break this down. The problem is it's hard to break this down because we don't actually yet know what it means fully,
Mhm.
and I'll try and clarify what I mean by that. But here's my concise summary of Senate Bill 25-003, which 25 is indicative of the year, so it's basically Senate Bill 3.
Yep.
This law goes into effect in August of 2026, so we have a little bit more of a year from now until it goes into effect. And this law does not ban anything. That's the first thing that's worth clarifying. Nothing
Right.
will be banned or illegal. Not a single gun would no longer be able to be sold in Colorado. All guns could still be sold here. However, we kind of create two buckets of guns.
Mhm.
Guns that you can just go buy like you always normally would, dealing with normal waiting periods or whatever other crap. And now we're creating a new bucket of guns.
You call those normal? That is our new
Normal here.
Yep.
And then we are going to create a new bucket of guns, selective semi-automatic firearms with detachable magazines. I'll come back to that in a minute. And these guns, in order to buy them, you will first have to obtain a permit. This permit will be issued by a law enforcement agency. And in order to obtain that permit, you'll have to complete some required training, which is yet to be particularly well defined. It will be defined by the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Service. And you have to go through a couple background checks, et cetera, and then you can get this permit. And then with said permit, you can go and now buy guns that are in this other bucket that have been identified. That's all pretty clear. What's not clear is what guns are in the bucket. So the kind of the starting benchmark line here is semi-automatic firearms with detachable magazines. So definitely things like an AR-15, are going to fall into this, an AK-47, AR-10, something like that. It's definitely going to fall into this. But then there's some things that start to become a little less clear. There's several exemptions written in the law, like, okay, all semi-automatic firearms with a detachable magazine, except for these exceptions. One of those exceptions written in the law is a list of very specific makes and models. The Benelli such and such, the Browning such and such. I mean, there's like 40 of them are named by name. And most of those are things you would generally associate with like hunting. Shotguns and rifles that have a detachable magazine, but you would traditionally associate as being like hunting calibers or not being like self-defense tools. But then there's also an exception written that says recoil-operated handguns. Recoil-operated handguns. And it's confusing to some degree because also it specifically names, okay, I guess I could have done better at setting this up. So the way the law works is it says that any semi-automatic rifle with a detachable magazine is in the bucket, and any gas-powered semi-automatic handgun with a detachable magazine is in the bucket. But then it says recoil-operated handguns are exempt. So in my pants right now is an HK-CC9. Is it gas-powered or recoil-operated? And I think some people are like, oh, it's recoil-operated, so then it's exempt. But other people are like, it's recoil operated via gas power. So it's not exempt. And that's where we're currently at here in Colorado, where our doomsday worst case scenario is most of our modern semi-automatic handguns are in the bucket of things that would require the new permit in order to purchase effective August of 2026. But our best case scenario is, as the legislators claimed when they debated this and proposed it, that your average semi-automatic handgun would not be in that bucket, that I would not need the permit in order to go buy it. But the state attorney general's office, basically the governor, which by the time this law goes into effect, we'll have a new governor. The burden is on them to basically publish some sort of list or guidance on what guns will be included in the bucket that this new law has defined. How's that for my summary?
It's a mess.
It's a disaster.
What I hear. And yeah, we ain't happy about it.
No, not okay.
I know a lot of people worked really hard and fought really hard lobbying. I certainly fired off numerous emails to legislators and even the governor's office. I actually sent quite a letter to the governor's office saying, these are the reasons why you should not sign these bills into law. And there was a point where I felt like there was a chance the governor would not sign a couple of these bills.
I was on the fence too. I was 50-50.
Because in years past, he's indicated, resistance to, I mean, this basically became a assault weapons ban to an extent. You're making it a lot more, and I know
It started as a ban.
it did start that
The
way.
law was amended to add the
training,
the ability to get a permit
yes.
to still be able to buy the thing.
Yeah. Which we've now made that very, very difficult to do, especially for those on limited income or fixed income. Who knows what that training is going to cost? The actual permitting is going to cost. There's a provision that basically the permit's going to cost whatever it costs to administer the program.
Yeah, it could cost anything.
So yeah, exactly. What's that going to be? I mean,
the cost of the training. I mean, the irony is that companies like us, it is in our best interest for these laws to go into effect and to apply to as many guns as possible, because it will force people to come take classes from us. We'll make a fortune of money. And it doesn't really impact us on the gun side because we have an FFL. We can get whatever we want anyway. So, like, from a business perspective, this is fabulous law. I hope it includes all the guns, but it's super unconstitutional and unacceptable in every respect.
Yeah. Yep. It's pretty wild. It'd be great if Elon and his team could doge a lot of the lawmakers.
That's a comment. Yeah.
That's a comment. Anyway, out of Arizona. So Arizona,
talking about unpopular governors.
Yes. Governor Katie Hobbs has vetoed 4 pro-gun bills. So this is like the opposite of Virginia, which we talked about in our last episode, where Governor Youngkin vetoed a bunch of gun control bills. Here in Arizona, the legislature is like, here's 4 pro-gun bills, and Governor Hobbs is like,
not today. Yeah. These are some of these. You're like, really? Like this was a concern.
Yeah. We're worried about this stuff.
Yeah. So Senate Bill 1014 would have removed suppressors from Arizona's list of prohibited weapons. So in Arizona, like regardless of what the U.S. Congress does, suppressors are prohibited. Okay, so that's. And by the way, the governor vetoed when she vetoed this bill. She cited public safety concerns and the quote potential for misuse.
Mm-hmm.
Those suppressors getting misused all the time.
Oh yeah.
So
every single assassin out there uses a suppressor, of course.
And frankly, a lot of things are misused. I don't know why that means that they have to be illegal. If we criminalized anything that has potential for misuse, we wouldn't have cars and pencils and stuff. All right. Senate Bill 1020 would have created concealed carry on campus provisions. She vetoed that one. Quote, she claimed allowing firearms on campus would threaten public safety and disrupt learning environments. Based on what data? We don't know. Senate Bill 1143 would have prohibited the use of the merchant category code thing we were talking about earlier. She vetoed that one. Senate Bill 1705 would have enforced a statewide gun law preemption law. So the idea here is that there's some concern that local municipalities in Arizona could have gun laws that are differing. And so we were trying to pass a new law that would have created universality across the state of Arizona as it relates to gun regulation. And she vetoed that. It would, quote, undermine local control, which is a valid concern, by the way. I just think that understanding the gun community and gun ownership, it's just one of those instances where we need to allow some universality. Otherwise, we're criminalizing people for relatively innocent intentions and actions.
My favorite example is to look just what we have right here in Colorado, because we used to have preemption and we don't any longer.
Well, it's been weakened at very least.
And so the problem with that is you have a law that's different in Denver than it is, say, in Aurora, okay? And you don't realize that, there's this little thin strip of land that is city of Denver that goes from the, actual core of
it's like a
Denver.
Speech bubble.
Yeah, that then goes out to where the airport's located, and that just by technically crossing that little strip of land from here to here, you go through Denver, and if you have the wrong thing in your possession or you're carrying the wrong way, like carrying openly, for instance, you're now violating the law because because Denver has greater restrictions than what the state has in place.
Yeah,
Preemption law has a place.
it absolutely does.
And I understand, like, because I'm also a big believer in, like, local
Local authority.
authority matters and is important, because the closer the government is to the people, I think the better it can be. I'm not saying it always is good, but it can be better when it's closer to the people. But there's certain issues where, and like I think the Second Amendment is one of those issues where it's important to have universality, as you just described, especially where it's a right as enshrined in the Second Amendment.
Yeah, yeah, that's where the debate lies.
So anyway, there you go. You Arizona, you have a legislature that's trying to do the right things here, and unfortunately, because elections have consequences, your governor said not today, as Jacob has been saying, and
Not
it cracks
cool.
me up.
Not cool. So we're gonna go to Cali.
California, this is a very interesting situation.
Ooh, I love this one.
Yeah.
It's super cool, like the legal aspect of this. So
Mm-hmm.
what you have is you have a world where the U.S. Supreme Court has said in the Bruin case that us, we have the right to carry a gun with us, not just in our home for personal protection, but in public. Now, so you get a lawsuit in California where someone sues the LAPD, basically saying, "Hey, like I am not a resident of California, but when I come to California, I am like my right to have a gun in public to defend myself, enshrined by the U.S. Constitution and clarified by the U.S. Supreme Court, is being restricted because I can't apply for a California permit. I've tried, but you guys reject all permits that come from non-residents. So how am I going to get? I can't. You also have no reciprocity. You don't honor a permit from any other state in the nation. So there's no legal way for a non-California resident to carry a gun in California. So lawsuit.
Right.
So a federal district court ruled on that and said, yeah, that's a problem. You can't do that. So California, and to be clear, it's a preliminary injunction. So the case has not been completely decided yet, but the court has granted a preliminary injunction. So they're basically saying it looks like probably that we're going to be ruling that this is unconstitutional. So until we're able to fully, decide on this case, for now we're going to force the state to accept non-resident concealed carry permit applications. So that's the dish.
Yeah, and what this means, by the way, is no county in California can refuse to accept or process an application solely because the applicant is not a resident of the state. Non-residency cannot be used as a reason to block or ignore applications. The normal requirements for a permit, background check, fingerprinting, firearms training, still apply.
Yep.
That's no surprise there, really.
Yep.
And issuance of a permit is not guaranteed, but they must treat non-resident applications fairly, just as they would a resident application. You've got to be able to prove membership in one of those 4 organizations that was mentioned
in the lawsuit. Yeah.
Yep. Submit a complete application, goes through the background check, fingerprinting, and firearms training as required. Now, by the way, firearms training varies from county to county in California.
Yeah, it's a little more universal than it used to be, though. Because
yes, it has standardized
the state said that it now has to be no less than 8 hours and have XYZ requirements. Before, there was no standardization. There was no specificity at all at state level. So counties were doing willy-nilly whatever they wanted. And now there's at least a minimum state requirement, but the county still can impose anything, from that minimum level up.
Right. The point is that you could, in theory, research all the counties and find the most favorable county to apply in.
Sort of. But I mean, the judge's preliminary injunction.
You must plan to visit the county where you're applying in the immediate future, which is interesting to me because it's like, okay, hold on here. How does that work exactly? Because first of all, it takes some amount of time to get applications processed. So
you got to have plans far out. I'm going to Disneyland in July of 2027.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to go apply for a permit today so that I have it in time.
Where stuff like this makes the most sense, though, for people is people that live on or near the border of the
Right.
state, or they
Yeah.
travel there
Totally.
regularly,
You live
across the border or
at Lake
whatever.
Tahoe
Hmm.
and you regularly are crossing into California all the time,
Yep.
and you have a Nevada concealed carry permit and you can't get a California
Yep.
one, and it's a nightmare for you.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see what the full adjudication of this case reveals, where it ends up. But for right now, if you go and join, I didn't see anything that mentioned you had to have already been a member as of
I didn't either. The
this
way I read it,
injunction.
yeah. So Colorado,
So
go ahead.
yeah, the California
Rifle and Pistol
Rifle
Association.
Pistol Association,
Yep.
Second Amendment Foundation, Gun Owners of America, Gun Owners of California. Join one of those organizations, so you have that membership in place, and if it's important enough to you. And I think, by the way, if I was somebody that lived in Reno, Nevada, or someplace like that, and I regularly crossed the border and traveled back and forth, to me it would be important enough.
I would go to the effort.
I believe in
Yeah.
being able to protect myself wherever I go, wherever I am.
Yeah.
So, this might be something worth looking into for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, pretty interesting case out of California there. Washington. Oh boy.
So let's get the easy one out of the way first. So
Mm,
we have a Washington Supreme Court magazine decision.
right.
So Washington had previously passed a law that bans magazines holding more than 10 rounds. There's a bunch of nuance to that. We're not going to get into it now. But someone filed suit and said, no, 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 that's totally unconstitutional, blah, blah, blah. And that went up the ladder until it got to the Washington State Supreme Court. And on May 8th of this year, the Washington Supreme Court upheld the ban. So they ruled 5-4, so relatively close
Yeah.
decision in the court. But they said, nope, the ban on magazines that hold 11 rounds or greater is fine. It's constitutional. It's acceptable. No problem. The lawsuit was actually brought by a gun store owner who had been charged for selling magazines that held more than 10 rounds.
Mm,
And he's like, I'm not doing anything illegal because these magazines are perfectly constitutional. So he fought the charges, and that's how this escalated to the state Supreme Court.
yeah. I don't know. I'm not super familiar with this case, but here's what's important with things like this to understand is, especially where the state Supreme Court has now ruled on this. A lot of times, I mean, a state Supreme Court has authority over state law and state constitutional issues. And if the case was brought before the courts challenging on state constitutional grounds, which that seems like that's probably the case here since it's gone before the state Supreme Court, if they want to take this typically to the federal level, a lot of times you got to bring that to the federal courts with uh, a U.S. constitutional argument that applies there, because otherwise, the state Supreme Court typically has authority on state constitutional issues. So it'll be interesting to see, where this goes from here. See if it's appealed upwards or how that works out. But yeah, that's not terribly surprising. Although, actually, the surprising thing for me here, Jacob, was that it was a split decision 5-4. I actually thought it'd probably be a bigger margin than that, just with the way Washington seems to have been going
Sure.
recently.
I don't know anything about their judges and courts and trials and peoples and stuff, but
Well, they've been
that's
under
pretty close
pretty, strict liberal control
for a little while.
for a while, and a state governor typically has the same authority like a U.S. president does, which is appointing justices to state justice positions like a Supreme Court. So you presume that it's going to swing quite leftward in that regard.
Yeah, over time. Yeah.
Washington's new gun control law creates permit to purchase system and de facto registry. This is the most recent news out of Washington, and this is kind of like the Colorado one we were just talking about a moment ago, but like goes to a whole
Way
nother
worse.
level.
Yeah, way worse.
And yeah, so I am so sorry, fellow Washington people. I say fellow, and like I identify in that we feel the pain of having such laws passed.
Oh man,
What's the deal with this one, and what makes it so much worse than Colorado's?
I spent a solid 2.5 hours, 3 episodes of The Office
Mhm.
on Tuesday night, hanging out with family while they were watching The Office, trying to figure out what this law means. And I did not hire an attorney, so I'll just add, that again, that I'm not a lawyer. It's not perfect legal interpretation, but I did my best to read it. I also found some helpful resources from what appears to be the Washington's arm of the National Association of Gun Rights. They had some good clarification on this. But anyway, this bill, it hits really, I'll call it like three main pillars from what I can decipher. The first one is we are creating a new permit that will be required to obtain before a person can purchase any gun.
Yeah.
You want to buy a gun?
Any
First, you got
gun.
to get this permit.
Yeah.
Yeah. No exceptions, all firearms, period. And obtaining this new permit, which will be administered by the Washington State Patrol, will require taking a class, a minimum of 8 hours with live fire. And the curriculum for that class will be determined, approved, and vetted by the Washington State Patrol. Instructors will be approved to teach it by the Washington State Patrol.
Mhm.
And and obviously background checks and other things. And it expires every 5 years. So it's not like it's a one-time thing. You got to keep re-upping this thing if you want to keep buying guns. So that's the first kind of main element, which is super not cool, man. Super not cool. I was trying to say that in like a Washington, like smoking weed high, like accent, like not cool.
You failed miserably, dude.
Ah, dang it. I'm not making fun of you.
Don't ever try that
I'm not
again.
making fun of you. People in Colorado smoke weed too. We invented smoking weed. Okay, anyway. So I don't smoke weed. In case this is like being in case this is ever brought into court as evidence, to be clear, Jacob does not smoke, nor has he ever smoked, nor does he ever intend to smoke any marijuana. Okay. The second pillar of this legislation, it actually revamps or adds some specificity at the very least, and changes the way the concealed carry training requirement is done.
Yep.
So in order to obtain a Washington State concealed carry permit, once this law goes into effect, you now will also have to have taken a minimum 8-hour training class with live fire and a minimum of 50 rounds fired in that class. This is not the same class as the permit to purchase.
Right.
So you couldn't go take one class.
How dare we try to make that,
and like get it done. Like, oh, I took the class and now I can get a permit to carry concealed and get a permit to go buy my gun to carry concealed. Oh, no. The way I read it is very clearly two separate and distinct things. Now, I suppose it is conceivable that the Washington State Patrol might choose to administer this in such a way that one class could get both done, but I think that is at their discretion, the way I read and interpret the law. So we'll see how that rolls. But it's also a minimum 8-hour class. And again, they will have the authority to vet and verify instructors to be able to teach it. So it's, a lot of states kind of get regulated in a way that's like, hey, as long as you're certified by some national firearm organization to teach stuff, then you can teach this too. But this, the way I read it, it did definitely clarify that that's a prerequisite to teach this concealed carry class in Washington. But it gives me the impression that the Washington State Patrol can potentially vet and or approve or verify instructors in that process. Mm-hmm. So that's, I think, the second pillar. The third kind of pillar of this legislation, which is perhaps the most crazy dangerous, though probably the thing impacts the average consumer the least directly, is the new restrictions or regulations it imposes on firearm dealers. So some pretty heavy stuff. In fact, it was so long, I was like having a hard time reading through it all and keeping my attention. But it specifies what kind of, if you have to have either bars on the window, or you have to do this, you have to have armor, pierced glass with the guns in it, and this kind of minimum, this kind of security system, and that, like, it's all this regulation around basically forcing gun stores to meet certain standards that are probably cost prohibitive for a large number of them. Frankly, I'm sure Cabela's can pull it off, but Bob's Guns maybe less so. So it's going to definitely put some gun dealers out of business. In addition to creating these requirements for dealers, it also forces dealers to provide sales records of firearm transactions to the state, and mandates the state create a database of people who have acquired the permit to purchase a firearm. So there's going to be a de facto registry of gun owners. There will be. Now, it won't be tied to their guns. It won't say, it'll say Jacob Paulsen is on the list of people who has obtained a permit to be able to buy guns. It won't say Jacob owns the following firearms. It won't go that far. It very specifically says it can't go that far. But that in mind, the sales records at the dealer, this new state sales record that's going to be created, which includes your physical description. This guy named Jacob, 5'9", white dude, little chubby around the middle, brown hair, blue eyes. That's the guy who bought this gun. Those sales records now will be sent to the state, whereas previously they have not been. And in most states, nothing like that has been done. So it's pretty hardcore, frankly.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And you just talked about how a registry won't be created that ties you to a specific gun purchase, but yet it almost kind of sounds like it does.
Yeah, it's like we won't, but send us the info anyway. Like, it's really awkward.
It's not awkward. It's intentional, and it's highly unconstitutional, in my opinion. My humble and unqualified opinion. But
more qualified than most, Riley.
Yeah, this is a doozy.
It's nasty.
I don't know what y'all got going on up there in Washington. I've been to your state a number of times. It's a beautiful state. Love your state. I have family that live in Washington, and yeah,
wowzers.
You need to clean house like ASAP. And I'm not calling for violence, to be clear. All right.
Again, if this is subpoenaed.
Although some out there would be like, why not? We should be. No, but yeah, like, elections are important.
This is wild stuff. It really is extreme. And I'm sorry that you guys have to deal with this. Now, this law does not go into effect. It's not slated to go into effect until like 2027. And it's there's a thing. I'm trying to think what the right word is. There's a clause that's best. Like a clause in this new law that does say it can't go into effect unless it receives funding. So potentially you could block this law from going into effect if you can figure out how to derail its potential for funding. It's going to require a whole bunch of money to get this into place. And then it will require, of course, a whole bunch of money to keep it in place. And like the Colorado one, as you mentioned when we were talking about Colorado, this Washington bill allows that whatever fee can be charged that they want to obtain the permit that allows you to then go be able to buy a gun, there would be a fee associated with that permit. And that fee can be whatever the state thinks it needs to be to pay for the program to be run. And the estimates from the Washington State Patrol, it's like 100 and something million. I think it was like 120 or 130
I think you
or
said
140
million.
Yeah,
we were talking earlier.
Yeah, some crazy amount of money that the State Patrol foresees it will cost to support this.
And government estimates are always wrong.
Oh yeah, and always low. They'll always cost more. So they can. This is a huge problem. I really struggle with this in Colorado the same way, because it's like they will have to show. The law says they have to show and report and provide data back to the legislature every year that shows that, hey, this is how much it costs for us to operate this program. This is how much we acquired in application fees from people who applied for it. And these two numbers have to balance. Or if they don't balance, then the next year we adjust the fee to put it into line with what is forecasted so that it will balance. But the problem this is it doesn't keep the government from inflating the program, from saying, well, we could hire 2 people to get this job done, but instead we're going to hire 20. Because that's going to make the politicians look good because we created this many more jobs. It's going to allow us to hook up Uncle Benny, who's a moron and can't hold down a job anyway, and hire him for this. Yep. And all of a sudden, what could have been done for this much money is now costing this much money, and you're paying for it.
To exercise your rights.
Yeah. That are enshrined in the Constitution.
So, yeah, I hope that, this will get challenged, obviously, and I hope that it's successful. As I hope our own issues are successful in, being overturned here in Colorado.
It will be easier to challenge once it goes into effect.
Yeah.
And that's true in Colorado too.
Yes.
We already have a couple of challenges on our law that was passed that's similar in some ways, but it's hard to say this law is unconstitutional when you can't show the courts how the law is being executed and that it's being executed.
You got to show that it's actually harming.
Yeah. So you have to have harm in order to have a lawsuit. So you have to have damages. So once these laws go into effect, that's when you'll see a slew of lawsuits come in real fast. And hopefully we get an injunction.
Here's what's amazing about the time frame of it not happening until May 1st, 2027 is, number one, by that point, a lot of people will have kind of forgotten about it to an extent. By that point, a number of legislators and probably the governor that put it into effect, that signed it, will be
Out of
probably
office.
gone.
Yeah.
So it's
a
like
long way down the road.
yeah, 2 years into the future. It'll be interesting to see what happens there. I do really sincerely, for you guys' sake, hope that something positive can happen with reversing this latest course of action in multiple courses of action in the state of Washington.
And I hope you gun dealers who are feeling screwed over, I hope you find a way to stay in business. I
Absolutely.
really do. It's really going to be critical that we do not lose our local gun stores.
Yes.
So please find a way.
And as a small business ourselves, like, we feel your pain of like trying to just stay in business as a small business.
Just
It
holding
gets
it together.
harder all of the time, it seems.
Yeah.
Especially as regulations continue to mount, that whether it specifically targets small businesses or not intentionally, they do affect small businesses very much so when such things are put into effect. Well, that brings us to a conclusion of our huge super episode, second part of 2 parts here. We have, I think, covered all the stories here. So a reminder that today's episode was sponsored by Tactical RX. TacticalRx.com is where you can go to learn more. And also the 2025 Guardian Conference, which you can check out at guardianconference.com. We hope to see you there in September. So with that, that's a wrap. Until next time.
Yeah. Train right, train often, and train at the Guardian Conference, guardianconference.com.
So that you can fight hard, fight fast, and fight true. Take care.